the beauty of the butterfly. How is that possibly a natural evolution? I mean, how could this have happened without some kind of design behind it? But anyway.
Well, there are actually many aspects of which is this one. Because let's look at something that is very obvious, okay? So the way it is claimed, the evolution that I don't like or that I do not accept, is that there are those random changes. So there's this creature while reproducing, his DNA is changing randomly due to copying errors. And if the error comes in a coding area of the DNA, maybe the offspring will die, but maybe it comes into an area that is not very important, that is not expressed, or a non-coding area. And when it comes into that area, it remains dormant until maybe sometime, under a certain stress, it will be expressed, and then natural selection will pick the individual that expresses that specific feature that was there. It happened randomly, but since there was no use for it, it was expressed. And this is where evolution...
Since there was no use for it, it was expressed?
It was not expressed at the time, but then it is expressed when there is a need, when a need for it. So, in this case, they would go and say the randomness would generate so many things. Many of them are neutral, many of them are harmful, and the majority is harmful and goes away. A good chunk is neutral and nobody cares, and some are beneficial, and the beneficial ones will remain sleeping because there is no use for them.
Dormant.
Yes, until the time comes where the individuals who have the beneficial ones will now have the chance to spread their genes. And then you ask this question. Let us say that somebody like Darwin or like Wallace, who were not there when genetics was discovered. So they're looking at things and they're making judgments based on the external appearance, or what is called phenotypes. So the external appearance says that, there are those changes and there are those fossils that says that things have changed over time. So they call this change evolution, and now they will need an explanation. When you have a backdrop of a worldview that rejects that there is intent that is pushing this, or you are always looking for an explanation that puts intent as the last resort. At the time of Darwin, it was like this, putting intent as the last resort, because he stopped at the first cell. He said that from the first cell, his assertion was, God breathed life into the first cell, and then it evolved from there.
But at least he did not deny the existence of God.
No, he said that God breathed life in the first cell. So I'm not sure if that is because he wanted to do that, or that is because it was outside of his domain of biology or zoology. So he wanted to say, okay, this is chemistry now, because for the first cell to happen, it is chemistry becoming biochemistry, becoming life. So I'm not sure what was his motivation, but he stopped there. But then today, this is even overrun, and there is abiogenesis and other stuff. The trick is, when you look at the aspect of randomness, where is this randomness being stored? Okay? So if the randomness is stored in a place where this place will do something, our observation that it causes disease, it causes deformity, it causes disabled offsprings, and this doesn't make sense. If it is stored in some other place where the system is not using this part of the DNA, and you are claiming that this change will now be stored there, so the question to you, if this part of the DNA is not a coding part, there are one of the facts, I'm not sure if I don't think it's commonplace knowledge, but our understanding to DNA is somewhere from 2 to 5% of what it is, because there is this coding parts, which is like from 2 to 5%, and from 98 to 95% of the DNA, we have no idea what it's doing. Yeah, and with time, we start to know what it's doing over the last 10 or 20 years.
So, I'm sorry, but when they say that, for example, the DNA of this, for example, I read one time that the DNA of human beings is 50 or 60% shared with bananas. I'm serious.
Yeah.
So, are they talking about the 2 to 5%?
They're talking about the coding.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're not talking about the 95 to 98%.
You see, the human being.
Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, the human genome has like 3 billion base pairs. Okay, and to do a study to compare the 3 billion base pairs with a few billion of some other creature is really quite expensive. So nobody does that. What you do is that you take a segment, a sample, 50k base pairs or something, and you take 50k base pairs from another organism and you try to match. And then the way they do it, I think, is very unfair. So they count on something called synteny. So they initially they will look at that chromosome that has this general shape and this general length and this, it's like a program, okay? So you see how this program, and then you look for another chromosome in the other creature that looks like this chromosome. It has synteny with it. It looks like it. It's more or less the same length. It's more or less the same arrangement. It has more or less the same arrangement in which you would find the coding regions and the non-coding regions, with approximate lengths looking like each other. And then you're starting already from an unfair point where you have already picked up, two things that look at each other, and then you start comparing. And guess what? You will find that they're looking like each other because you have...
Because that was a criterion.
Yeah, because this was a criteria. But even if you want to set that aside, what does DNA do? So DNA, as far as we understand, and we don't understand that much, codes for proteins, right? So you have this creature and that other creature, and we eat other creatures, by the way. So you eat plants and you eat animals, and the reason we can eat them, the reason animals can eat each other and can eat plants, is that we are made of the same stuff. So we are hydrocarbons, and we are carbohydrates, and we are proteins. And proteins, which is very important, is the machine. So no proteins, you have nothing. So what do you expect? Do you expect that living things will always have proteins that have no relation to each other whatsoever, or that proteins are common? So when you're eating a piece of meat, it has proteins that look like proteins that you have, right? So where are those proteins coming from? The structure of the protein itself is coded in a gene that is then transcribed and becomes a protein. So generally, when you find two creatures that look phenotypically like each other, all right, you expect that their materials and their design looks like each other. So this is a car and this is another car. This is a Mercedes and this is a Toyota, but they're cars. What do you expect? You expect a shaft, you expect a motor, you expect glass, you expect chairs. So if you are looking at the materials that this car and that car are using, what do you expect? Great similarity, right or not? Now, if you're comparing a car to a motorcycle, and you're looking for the chromosomes, the piece of the design that is coding for the motor, what do you expect? You expect similarity, right? Because it is both internal combustion engines. So you expect the internal combustion part to look like each other.
Yes, more or less.
More or less. Now you go a bit farther. It is a bicycle, but the bicycle is a locomotive. So it has gears, it has a chair to sit on, it has a steering something, okay? So as long as you are in the locomotive domain, even when you move to a plane, all right, it looks different, but there is an engine, right? So you must find similarity. But if you look at a car and, I don't know, a dining table, maybe there will not be that much similarity. But if you look to furniture, tables and chairs and this and that, you will still find the similarity. If they are wooden furniture, you'll find more similarity. So when you say that, okay, I see that a bicycle has 50% similarity in materials, for example, which essentially is proteins, which essentially is DNA, versus a car, does it mean that a car was one day a bicycle that evolved? Or does it mean that the manufacturer of the car and the manufacturer of the bicycle, which is a human being, had the same intent, which is to make them locomotives, and is by his nature using similar designs and similar materials to produce them?
So, as in the similarity in DNA could actually be a sign of a unified origin.
Yeah, of course.
For all things.
Of course.
Whatever that origin is, I mean, let's not get into that right now.
Yes, yes. So you see software. You look in the street, you see this car, you know it's a Mercedes. How do you know? It looks like it.
Yeah,
It has the feeling. If somebody hides the logo, you still know that it is.
You know the headlights, you know the grill.
You know how it feels. You see a 1950 Mercedes and you know it's a Mercedes. It's not because you've seen it before.
Yes.
It's because it is.
Same with the BMW.
It is the mentality of the people who are manufacturing it. You see,
branding their creation.
yes, and this is what creators do. You're a photographer, you're a videographer. I will feel that this is a Hitchcock movie. I feel that this is Steven Spielberg. Why? It's the fingerprint is there. It doesn't mean that he made this film and then he shuffled the scenes and then it became that other film. But the fingerprint is there. This is the poetry of that. This is a story by Shakespeare, or a novel by Shakespeare. I feel him. So if I am to pick a theory, I will pick a different one that I will then need to use the scientific method to verify it. Which can be, for example, that the first cell had all the code for every living creature that exists today. All right? And what is known as speciation events, the generation of a new species, is essentially the expression of part of the genetic code that was in that ancestor in an uncoding area and somehow moved into a coding area and became, it was in an ancestor in an uncoding area and somehow moved in the next generation into a coding area. So why would I think that this is possible? It is actually because of this experiment. It happened within this century. And evolutionists were crazy about the experiment because all the time they had the same problem, that their mechanism is not observable. You're saying that natural selection is working with random mutations and doing this and that millions of years ago. Show me. So it takes millions of years ago. It takes millions of years and it happened millions of years ago. How will I show you? I will then respond. It is unfalsifiable. It is unobservable. It is untestable. Your theory is as bad as the mythology that you reject. So this movement happened through the last few decades where very serious experiments were taken to try making evolution observable. And one of these experiments is an E.Coli experiment where the researcher put E.Coli, it's a bacteria, and it happened over considerable amount of time, and it put them under an environment where they will be deprived from what they like to consume, which is glucose. And he will put in the environment citrate. And you can consume citrate, but this kind of organism does not consume the citrate. And with many generations, suddenly, citrate is being metabolized. And then everybody is all over the place and, popping drinks because, hey, evolution has happened. E. coli has now moved from oxidizing this kind of sugar into oxidizing citrate. And the significance of that is that a creature has had radical change that was not previously observed because you put it in an environment where you very high stress, that it's the whole population will die unless something happens. And then they, yes, now this was its evolution, etc. And then later, of course, unfortunately, and this is a problem with honesty, when this is publicized, the story is never complete. Or the times that I have heard the story, you need to dig. And then what turned out to be the case is that under stress, the code for consuming the citrate was already there. The cell was already equipped with consuming it, but a certain piece of the formula, which is letting the citrate in, receptors to pick it up, etc., was not activated. And that after a few generations, the code for that was already in, it was there all the time, in an encoding area of the DNA. Epigenetics picked that code, copied it, moved it into another gene that is a coding gene, so that it can be transcribed, it can be read by the mechanisms that reads it. And once this happened, the gate for citrate to come in and enter the same metabolic process was open.
Which is more in line with the idea of adaptation as opposed to...
Yes, but since this is not adaptation in terms of the gene already exists and got expressed, now this is why I really hate what the way linguistics comes into. You remember what I said? This is not adaptation, because you think of adaptation as you already can run, but now you are, lions are running after you, so, you adapt, and like the frogs already had the light color and the dark color, so the genes were there. But now this gene, it was not exactly there. Its place was there, but a piece of the code was put into this place. This raises great questions. How does the cell know, for God's sake, that this place has the code for the citrate to work, and to take it and to put it exactly in that place, that when it gets transcribed, the feature will be activated? This is a very big question.
So are you saying that this evolution that happened...
They called it something, they actually almost invented the word, they call it acceptation. And it's very difficult to look up this word, because it is almost, you're making words up. Because what this says is what I would say, that this kind of funding to prove that randomness with natural selection, the millions and billions that are going down the drain, should be directed to this. What is there in the non-coding areas? What are the real capabilities of life? And what is really directing life? How does a dumb E.Coli know? And then you find people writing papers about the intelligence of bacteria. The intelligence of bacteria, the smart bacteria. Because and bacteria is smarter than we think. You have papers smarter than we think. The problem is with the epistemology. And this is where religion comes in. Because religion says that life and that self-awareness or consciousness, or what we call a soul, are external to the material world. And I have an episode on the channel that's talking about life, and I'm just saying this very simple. Get a cell, kill it, you have all the materials, you have all the components, but it's dead now. Make it live. Just one cell. It's biochemical reactions. We have been working with chemistry for hundreds of years. Just make it live again. What has taken off from the cell so it's now dead? Something killed it, but why can't you just fix the motor?
Breathe life into it again.
Yes, just do it. Okay? Get a mosquito, kill it. Now it's dead. All the components are there. It's been intoxicated with something. Get the toxins out. Make it live again. Somebody has died in the hospital and he's been declared dead. Dead like brain death, heart death, everything. Why don't you make him live again? Shock him, do whatever you want. His cells will still be living. If you look under the cells, so there is these two levels of what we call life. There is life and there is awareness, and awareness needs a soul. You kill the sheep, the meat of the sheep is still a living cell, right? But the sheep has gone away. You cannot make him live again, right? And when you destroy the second level, which is life, you cannot also make it come back again. So when you are stuck in an epistemology that is completely naturalistic and materialistic, you have a problem, because things in this universe already lend you to the idea that the universe is not everything. Otherwise, how did the universe come into existence altogether? So the Big Bang says it started from a singularity. Singularities are like black holes. Black holes don't blow. Who blew it? Who blew it? Even if the material was there, who blew it? Because when you are looking into cosmology, they would say black holes are, there is a singularity in the middle, it's very concentrated and dense matter, and they don't blow. So if you're telling me that there is a singularity in the beginning and then it blew, it banged, who banged it? And even with the recent research about geodesics, it says that before the singularity goes into zero, into nothing. So even the whole existence of the universe says that there is something else. Now, when you talk to a naturalist, or to a cosmic evolutionist, or whatever you would like to call him, and you say, how did this happen? He says, I don't know. Okay, I'm telling you that I'm putting it to you that somebody did it. He says, I cannot agree with this statement because maybe it is something. You are saying, answer the question of who, I would look for the question of what. But why are you looking for the question of what if your science is saying that the what cannot do it? It's against your science. And then he will say, but maybe the science before the Big Bang, the laws of nature before the Big Bang are different than the laws now. So you are referring to mythology now. You are referring to laws that you do not know. But the problem is, he will not acknowledge the who. It's an epistemological problem. Your knowledge is confined to what materialism can tell you. And materialism will not tell you that there is a who. It can tell you that, so you have all the nonsense, absurd theories, bouncing universes, multiverses, this and that. All right? So if I would put a theory, for it to be a theory, I will start from this thing about the citrate and that thing about this and that and acceptations, all this jargon that they are creating, and I would put it like this. Maybe God created one cell that was the repository of everything, or maybe many. So this one will become the plants, this one will become the animals, this one will become this. And when you look to religions, you see that there are indications that there are very clear indications that there is creation of material things and creation of living things. Now, it's not very expressive about how or how many of them, but it is very clear about, for example, that the creation of everything is one thing and the creation of human beings is another thing. And this is again one of the major problems, because the theory is not only trying to answer a question about science, it's trying to answer a question about us. And it would classify humans as great apes. And then it would say that great apes, including humans, have a common ancestor and we have evolved from it. Now, religion does not say this. Religion is very insisting and very serious that humans are a separate creation. They started with Adam and then Eve and then the rest. Evolution will not accept this. Evolution will not recognize that the human soul is different from what is the equivalent of a soul with animals. But then science cannot explain, the human intellect cannot explain human language, cannot explain the aspect of beauty that you talked about. Yes. Poetry, for example. What is the mathematics? What is the survival benefit of poetry? Why are humans very eloquent? There is no survival thing. Maybe talking makes sense, but poetry, it is an aspect of beauty. Mathematics will not help you run from the tiger. You're not calculating his speed and your speed.
Definitely survival of the fittest, so to speak, wouldn't have anything to do with all of the cultural evolution, I guess,
even I will tell you a funny thing. So one of my videos, I say that there is no explanation for the transition from unicellular life to multicellular life. It's completely impossible. And I'm making specific arguments. It is impossible that one cell became 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 cell organisms, and it is impossible that one cell became a colony and then the colony becomes an organism. And there is this colonial theory where they say that single cells, they group in, that algae that you see floating over the water. So these colonies at a point of time became, fluffy organisms, and these fluffy organisms started. But then when you go into the lab and you see natural selection really working, when colonies happen, what is the idea of colonies? We are sitting together, we are working together. So we are metabolizing together, we are helping each other, we are protecting each other, etc. as cells. So you expect that each cell will give and take, and you give as much as you take. But then there is this thing which are cheaters. So some of the cells are taking much more than they're giving. They are termed cheaters. But guess what? Natural selection favors cheaters, because they become in an advantageous. The other cells do not know what's happening. So those are taking more of the food, and they're giving less. So they're surviving, and they are becoming dominant. And you know what happens? The whole colony breaks down.
Because they become all cheaters.
Because the cheaters it's like human communities. And this is what I am saying. If you take intent out of it, cheaters or things that are not really about fitness, chaos reigns, absolutely. And this, I have another episode about entropy, which is a thermodynamic concept. And it says that things degrade with time. So evolution exactly says the opposite thing, that things get better with time. How come? And then when they're confronted with without intent, and then when they're confronted with this, they say, we don't say that they're changing. Yes, but the change on the ground is from a single cell to a human being. Obviously, the gradient is going to go on better. Explain it, please, to me. Thermodynamics says that when you build a building, if you don't maintain it, means intent, means injecting energy in a designed way. You're not just pumping energy at the building, you're pumping energy at the right places at the right times, and in the correct methodology, you maintain the building. But what happens if you do not maintain the building? The building falls apart. Likewise with life, likewise with these experiments. But the very depressing thing, the very disappointing thing is that they will look at those experiments like what they did with the acceptation thing, and they give it a different name: ratcheting, acceptation, this and that, hollow names, empty shells, that are convergent evolution, that are ways to exit. That when you are in the lab, when you're looking at reality, it says something else. But you stick the word evolution on it, you give it a funny name that nobody understands, and you say, it is another type or another mechanism of evolution.